The water in the basin had gone cold, and I stood over it anyway, my hands resting on the rim, waiting for something to feel different. The house was quiet in that gray. Early way mornings are quiet after a wedding, not peaceful exactly, just still. I kept waiting to feel like a different woman than the one who had gone to sleep the night before. I did not. I stood there a long time before I understood that this, too, was something no one had told me to expect. I'm Rebecca, and this is where I tell the truth about the life I was raised in, carefully, honestly, without turning the people I love into villains. If you've ever waited for a feeling you were promised would come naturally, and it didn't, I think this one is for you. Subscribe if these stories mean something to you, and tell me, what's a moment you expected to feel different than it did? I was married on a Tuesday in October. The sky the pale, hard blue it gets right before the cold settles in for good. My mother had told me, the week before, that marriage would make everything make sense, that whatever confusion I carried as a girl would settle into place the moment I became a wife. She said it with such certainty, folding my good dress over her arm as she said it, that I never thought to question whether it was true. I only remember thinking, soon then. Soon I will understand. The wedding itself was full of warmth I still hold carefully even now. My father cried, which I had never seen him do, not even at his own mother's funeral. The singing went late into the night, voices rising and layering over the long tables in a way that made my chest feel full in a way I didn't have words for. An older woman, a friend of my grandmother's, took my face in both her hands during the feast and said, "There now. You're settled." I smiled and thanked her, the way I was supposed to, though something in the word settled landed strangely in me, like a shoe that fit but pinched somewhere I couldn't quite locate. That first morning, standing at the basin, I noticed I still felt like myself. Not transformed. Not arrived. I felt the way I had felt the day before, and the day before that a little tired, a little cold, wondering what to make for the noon meal. I stood there longer than I needed to, waiting for the difference I'd been promised to arrive, the way you wait for a delayed guest, checking the road again, and again past the hour they said they'd come. Samuel was gentle that morning, and nervous in a way that made me feel, oddly, less alone. He explained the wood stove to me twice, though I'd used one my whole life, and laughed a little too quickly at something that wasn't especially funny. I understood, watching him, that he too was performing a certainty neither of us actually felt yet. We had both been given the same promise, I think in different words, that this day would deliver something immediate and complete, and we were both quietly discovering that it hadn't, without either of us saying so aloud. I had been raised, like every girl in our community, to understand marriage as more than a life stage. It was taught to us as a kind of spiritual completion, the place where a woman's restlessness finally settled into its proper shape. The Ordnung shaped our days, but this particular teaching shaped something deeper, an expectation, unspoken but absolute, that certainty would simply arrive on the other side of the wedding, the way morning arrives on the other side of night. I had never once questioned this teaching. I had simply believed it, the way I believed the sun would rise. The chores that morning brought their own quiet relief. There is a particular peace in the physical rhythm of farm work, the weight of the pail, the warm breath of the cows, the sun climbing slowly over frost-covered fields. For a little while, doing the ordinary things I'd always done, I forgot to search for the feeling I hadn't found yet. I want you to understand both of these things were true at once. I was uneasy, and I was also, in that ordinary morning light, at peace. I did not yet know how to hold both feelings without thinking one of them meant I was doing something wrong. My cousin Naomi came by that week to help me with the wash, 3 years married herself, and known in our family for her quick, dry humor. At one point, wringing out a sheet, she said almost offhand, "It doesn't feel different right away, does it? Everyone acts like it will." I looked up at her, and something in my chest went very still. I asked her what she meant, and she only smiled a little sadly and said, "You'll figure out the name for it eventually." I did. She didn't explain further. She only handed me the next sheet, and we worked in a silence that felt, for the first time that week, like company instead of confusion. That evening, alone again after Samuel had gone out to check the horses, I sat by the lamp and tried to name, honestly, what I had expected marriage to feel like. I could not do it. I only knew there had been a shape in my mind, something whole, something certain, and that whatever I felt now did not match that shape. A small, quiet fear settled into me then, one I did not say aloud even to myself in plain words, that if the feeling I'd been promised hadn't come yet, perhaps something in me was already failing at the one thing I had been raised my whole life to do well. I sat with that fear longer than I want to admit, turning it over the way you turn over a stone looking for what's underneath it. It was Naomi, again, who finally gave me the words for it, on a visit near the end of that first month. I asked her outright this time, not offhand, not careful, just plain. I asked her if she had ever felt, in those early weeks, like she was waiting for something that never came. She set down her mending and looked at me for a long moment before she answered. "It isn't that it doesn't come," she said. "It's that no one tells you it isn't supposed to arrive all at once. They tell you marriage settles you like flipping a switch. But it's not a switch. It's closer to a fire you have to keep feeding, some nights so low you'd swear it had gone out." I remember feeling something loosen in my chest when she said it, not relief exactly, but the particular relief of being believed. The moment that made it real for me came on an ordinary evening, weeks later, nothing special about it at all. Samuel and I were sitting by the stove after supper, not talking much, him mending a bit of harness, me with a basket of mending of my own. I looked up at him at one point and felt, quietly, without any drama attached to it, a kind of closeness I hadn't felt on our wedding night. It hadn't arrived suddenly. It had been built, the way a wall is built, one ordinary evening laid on top of another, so slowly, I hadn't noticed it happening until I looked up, and it was simply there. I want to be honest with you about something else because it matters to me that you understand both sides of this. That same week, our whole community gathered for a meal after the harvest, long tables set up in my uncle's yard, children running barefoot through the stubbled field, women passing dishes down the line the way we always had. I sat in the middle of that warmth and felt, fully and without contradiction, how much I loved this life and these people. The teaching that had left me feeling behind that first week was never given to hurt me. It came from women who loved me and simply didn't have better words for something as slow and uneven as real closeness actually is. Naomi told me, that same visit, that she had stopped waiting for marriage to feel like an arrival somewhere around her second year. She said she started thinking of it instead as something unfinished on purpose, not a door you walk through and are changed, but a room you keep building, a little more each season. She said this brought her more peace than the original promise ever had, because an arrival can disappoint you, but an unfinished thing only asks you to keep showing up. I have thought about that so many times since. I think it may be the truest thing anyone told me that whole first year. The full weight of it settled into me quietly, the way most true things do. It was not a lie, what my mother told me. It was not even really wrong. It was only smaller than the truth, a shorthand passed down because no one had found a gentler way to prepare a girl for how gradual real change actually is. My own uncertain, slow-building feelings were not a failure of my marriage or my character. They were simply what closeness actually looks like, before it's had time to become the thing you'll later call love without a second thought. If you're listening to this and you have ever waited for a feeling everyone promised would come naturally, and felt something like shame when it didn't arrive on schedule, I want you to hear this clearly. You were not behind. You were not broken. You were simply living in the true, uneven pace of things, while everyone around you spoke as if it moved in a straight line. There came an evening, some weeks after that, when I told Samuel plainly what I had been carrying. I said I thought I was supposed to feel different by now, and that when I didn't, I'd been afraid something was wrong with me. He was quiet for a moment, and then he told me, with something like relief in his own voice, that he had felt the very same thing, and never once said it aloud, certain he was the only one. We sat with that shared, ordinary confession longer than either of us had words for, and something between us settled, not suddenly, but for good. I stood at that same wash basin again, not long ago, the water just as cold, the light through the window just as gray. But my stillness this time was not confusion. It was simply stillness, chosen, familiar, mine. I never got the feeling I was promised, not the way it was described to me. What I got instead was slower and stranger, and far more mine than any promise could have been.